Good morning, and welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, Unitarian Universalist. I'm Kathy Putnam, and I'm a member of the Worship Associates Ministry here at the church. I especially want to welcome any visitors or newcomers who are with us today and call your attention. There's a special note for you on the back side of your order of service. Welcome guests and newcomers. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. I also want to welcome those of you who are attending online and remind you that the hymn lyrics and all of the elements of the service are displayed on the live stream screen. For the complete order of service, including the weekly announcements, schedule, and upcoming events, the link to the PDF is in this morning's church email and on the church's website. Now, there are just a few things to keep in mind. We're masking inside on Sunday mornings as a way of striving to be an inclusive community. All outdoor spaces are now mask optional. Additionally, the fellowship gathering in the community room is also mask optional. Our Sunday social is hosted by Rachel Rose and the Welcoming Ministry, and the in-person social will be held immediately following this service in the cast courtyard. There will not be an online Sunday social today, but it will return next week, and the new member reception will be held at 1 o'clock. Now, if you haven't done so already, please turn off or silence cell phones to maintain a worshipful experience. We've got a couple announcements, and the first is from Susan Spalt.
Good morning. This is Mental Illness Awareness Week, a week sponsored by the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, an organization aimed at replacing stigma with understanding and providing support to those affected by mental illness, which is 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 6 youth aged 6 to 17, not counting all the family members and friends who are also affected. When someone goes into anaphylactic shock, nobody says, well, if they just concentrated on breathing normally, they would be okay. They would not say, well, it's your fault. Yet with mental illness, which has many causes, assumptions are often made. It's somebody's fault, usually the parents, or the individual with mental illness. They're just not trying hard. Mental illness is hard enough to deal with without having to cope with the misunderstandings caused by stigma. The mental health ministry consists of church members who have experience in dealing with mental illness, who can provide confidential emotional support, information on local mental health resources, and other help as needed. The monthly peer-led support is contagious gatherings are for people who have family members with mental illness. We are not now able to offer a support group for individuals with mental illness. We meet in person when we can, on Zoom when that's best. We don't offer easy answers, or even hard ones, but the group offers fellowship, understanding, and support. We also have a phone tree our members can use. Coping with mental illness is hard enough. You shouldn't have to do it alone. Contact me or Marion Hirsch for more information, or see me after class. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And now we'll hear from Diane Williams about today's Share the Plate.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm Diane Williams with the Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Task Force, which is sponsored by Side with Love. Today's Share the Plate will benefit the Orange County Rape Crisis Center. The center provides services beyond what its name implies. It's well known for outstanding professional services to help foster a world where children can grow up happy, healthy, and safe. The center professionals support the healing process, plus educational programs for people of all ages and preventive training for families and community groups, which is exactly where we come in. Parents, religious education staff, grandparents, babysitters, we can all benefit from their training on awareness and prevention strategies, including how to talk to children, what we can do to keep them safe. The center staff have agreed to provide training for us next Saturday, October 15th, from 10 a.m. to noon on Zoom. Some of us on the task force have had the good fortune of receiving the training. It was amazing. For me, as a grandparent and a professional educator, it gave new meaning to the saying, "You don't know what you don't know." We invite you to stop by the Side with Love table in the courtyard after the service today, because we have with us Lang, who is the Associate Director of the Center. We're so pleased that she was able to join us today. She'll be able to answer whatever questions you might have about the center. You can sign up for our training today or use the link in our weekly announcements or our flyer. Space is limited, even though it's on Zoom, and they would like to have our total number of attendees by Thursday, October 12th, so they can provide resource booklets. Our entire community benefits from keeping the center strong with donations for their good work. So please be generous today. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Now please stand in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 40 in the gray hymnal, "The Morning Hangs a Signal."
The morning
A century ago, a Universalist minister named Louis Fisher offered these words: "Universalists are often asked to tell where they stand," he wrote. "The only true answer to give to this question is that we do not stand at all. We move." Unitarian Universalism is a religion that changes. In truth, it's always been that way. Our forebears believed that revelation is not sealed. They said, "The Lord hath more truth and light yet to break forth out of his holy word." Today, we say that our religion evolves. We say, like the title of our gray hymnal, that we are a living tradition. How do you respond to change? Do you find it exciting or exhausting? Is change something you embrace or resist? Does change stir your curiosity or evoke feelings of grief and loss? For most of us, it's probably a mixture of all of these feelings. Come, let us enter this service. Who knows how we might be changed in this hour? Come, let us worship together. You'll find the words for your chalice lighting in your order of service, and if you wish to do so, please join me in reading them. Here today, in this place, with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know. And this world. May this chalice we light our way.
While the choir's coming up for this, I want to let you know this is a piece by a Brazilian composer based on Psalm 150 from the Bible, but in Latin. And it's about Laudate Domino, means praise God, and then it says praise God with all types of music. So if you listen closely, you'll hear salterio, psaltery, timpani, coro, chorus, organo, cimbalis, cymbals. So they just call out all the different instruments by which you can create joy and praise God.
Laudate Deus, At this time, we are going to honor those who within the past several months have made the decision to become members of our church family. The last time we held a new member recognition was in mid-June at the same Sunday as our congregational meeting, and so this is our newest group of new members since then. In just a moment, I'm asking for Rachel Rose, our Director of Membership and Communications, and Ellie Spey of our Welcoming Ministry to come forth. And Rachel's going to read the names of our newest members, and as she reads the names, we invite those members to come up. I got this wrong at the first service, and there was confusion, so we're going to get it right at the second. Invite the new members to come up and line up across the stage here if you are present.
Rowan Marshall, Alex Hollad, Kristen Trangsrud, Jeff Petrella, Jonathan Bittner, Will Hoy, Betsy Yarrison, Kathleen Correo, Carol Rogers, Harrison Gray, LaDonna Gray, Hunter Blanton, Patty Ahalt, and Bev Kowalik.
Members of the Community Church of Chapel Hill Unitarian, reading wrong. On behalf of the membership committee, it is a joy to welcome you into this community of memory and hope. Each time we welcome a new member, we become something new. So we ask you, as our newest members, will you promise to walk together with us, sharing the joys and the responsibilities of membership? If so, please say we will. Members of the Community Church of Chapel Hill Unitarian Universalist, will you welcome these people into our congregation? Will you reach out to them in friendship, including them in our activities and fellowship? Will you be open to their unique gifts and perspectives? Will you extend a warm welcome to each of them, remembering that each of us was once a new member? If so, please say we will. We will.
Becoming a member of this church is an important first step, but it is only a first step. I charge you new members to grow in your faith, but more importantly, I charge you to find and share your special gifts with us. Ours is a shared ministry, and each of us has a crucial role to play. We need you. We need your energy. We need your ideas. And as you give generously of yourselves, we all become richer.
Now what's going to happen is that Rachel is going to pass down the line, offering you a chalice pin. You get your choice of 2 different designs at least in there. And then following Rachel, Ellie and I are going to come by and offer you a warm handshake welcoming you. Please stay up front, and once we get to the end of the line, everybody, that's your cue to clap loudly. And after you've basked in the applause, you can make your way back to your seats. So.
have we received of gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit, and gladly we bring to our church and its wide concerns a portion of this bounty. Today, our generosity extends beyond our walls as we give to our share the plate. If you wish to donate online, there's information on the church's website, and there's a QR code inside the order of service which can be read by your cell phone's camera. If you're writing a check, make it out to the church and write STP in the memo line. We'll now receive the morning offering.
Each week, we hold in our service a time for sharing the joys and the sorrows that we bring with us into this community. It's during this time that we, if we've come with either a significant personal joy or a significant sorrow, you're invited to come forward, place a stone in our water bowl, and in a few sentences, speak your joy or your sorrow. Let us enter into this time of tenderness and trust.
Good morning. I'm Diego Rivero Ciregui, and I placed that stone for Dr. Tom Meixner. He was a professor of hydrology and the head of the Department of Hydrology and Water Resources at the University of Arizona, Tucson, who this past Wednesday was shot and killed in his office soon after finishing lecturing for his class. I had the fortune of meeting Tom about 18 years ago. He was a dear colleague and friend of many in my community, in my professional community. He was 52, he leaves a wife and 2 teenage boys, and a community that remembers him for being a very special guy, a very funny man, and having the capacity of elevating and celebrating everyone's accomplishments, big and small. So I ask that you please keep his family in your thoughts.
Hello, I'm Rachel Rose, and many of you know about my deep, inescapable sorrow. My mother, who raised me as a single mother and lived with us for most of my 24-year marriage, and helped us raise our children. I got to be her full-time caregiver, and she died in my home on Saturday, a week ago Saturday, October 1st. And while that is a deep, deep loss for my family, my joy is that she was part of this beloved community for 10 years. And as Reverend Thom often says, everyone can be an unofficial member of the caring ministry, and I've seen this in action. Reverend Thom, members of the staff, and members of this community have reached out and comforted our family with compassion and care, and I'm so moved and grateful. My next sorrow is that my husband on Tuesday was hit by a car while driving, and it totaled our vehicle, and he was hospitalized with several broken ribs and a broken pelvis and a bruised lung and more. My joy is that he is home, he is alive, and he is showing improvement. My third joy is that every new member recognition is a joy for me, that we are a community that welcomes new people to share their light with us and to help us live our mission and affect our love for this world within and beyond these walls. Thank you for being that community.
Hi, I'm Gray Brown. I have first a sorrow that my young neighbor who was 18 passed away last Saturday night. And so if you would hold her and her family in your thoughts and prayers. And I appreciate the work that Susan Spalt does, but there's so much stigma still around this. I think of the times at the grocery store when I'm offered to contribute to book bags or the Army or veterans, and I'm trying to remember a time when I've been asked to offer support to mental health communities and organizations. The other is a concern for my sister who's having hip surgery this week, to hold her in your thoughts during that and also in the healing process afterwards. And finally, a joy that my daughter, Jessie Clay, and her, well, this is where it gets confusing to me. They're getting married. And so even when they were boyfriend and girlfriend 10 years ago in high school, I felt it was more than that. And as much as I love saying my daughter's fiancé, it's more than that. So I've decided they are each other's beloved, and they will celebrate next Saturday out near Snow Camp and have a wedding. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilkes and my wife Becky. My sorrow is that my mother passed away this last Friday, and she had kind of a rough time of it the last few weeks. So it was kind of a sad situation there. But we did have good hospice care, and all three of her sons were able to get together, and we reconnected, and we were all there in the end. So that worked out good. So, thank you.
My name's Mary Ellen Adams, and I moved here a little more than a year ago from Bath, North Carolina, to Hillsborough. And I have a joy today. I have 5 good friends from Bath who are visiting and who are with me at church this morning.
Final stone is placed this morning for all of the joys and the sorrows that we hold in our hearts that were not spoken. Invite you, before we have spoken prayer and silent prayer, I'd invite you to open up your gray hymnal to number 123, Spirit of Life, and to hold that hymn in readiness. Dear Spirit of Life, source of our being and our becoming. God within and amongst us. We ask that we hold in our hearts first all of the joys and the sorrows spoken this morning. Be with us in moments of loss, as we face grief. As we face the intrusion of violence into our world. Be with us in our recovering, in our seeking for understanding and compassion, in the healing we would seek. Be with us as well in the joys of our living, the joys of friendship, the joys of togetherness, the joys of community. Remind us of compassion. Help us to reach out ever across that small space which is always between us, to meet each other, to join our sorrows, to express compassion, to share. We pray as well for the sorrows and the struggles of our world. In particular, we pray for places in the world afflicted by warfare, violence, and hatred. May we find in our prayers, like our hymn says, that rootedness, those roots that hold us close to ourselves, to each other, to this world, and to you. May we also find those wings that set us free, allowing us the joy of living. Amidst all of these sorrows and all of these joys, amidst those spoken and unspoken, we hold a few moments of silence together. I invite you to be still with me for a time. And I invite us to join our voices in song as we sing number 123, Spirit of Life.
Spirit
So after the first service this morning, I made the decision that I'm going to change, no pun intended, change my sermon a little bit. Because it occurs to me as I was preaching it that I really, I wrote a sermon about church and change, which is a subject that's really interesting to me. But I also, it operates on several different levels. And so I also want us to reflect on the role that change plays in our lives, in our hopes, in our dreams, in our families, in our communities. And so hopefully, as I talk a little bit about church at the beginning, hopefully you might think beyond the sermon to whatever change that you've encountered in your life. I want to tell you about the first time I ever sang that hymn we just sang, Spirit of Life. It was my childhood church. It was 1993. I was a junior in high school. I remember it was 1993 because the gray hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition, which we sang it out of, had just been published. And the minister stood before us and invited us to sing Spirit of Life the way a parent might invite their child to eat Brussels sprouts. You don't have to like it, but I want you to try it. So we sang Spirit of Life, and as it came to a close, there was a rustling of papers in the congregation as everyone turned at the same moment to the next page to see if there was any more. One person exclaimed loudly, "Is that the whole hymn?" And the whole congregation seemed a bit stunned and confused, because for all of us that day, Spirit of Life was strange and new. It only had one verse. All of our hymns have 4 verses. And the verse didn't even rhyme. Hymns are supposed to rhyme. And the theology and the imagery was new to us too. We'd never sung about a spirit of life before. That's not how Unitarian Universalists talked. And we never used metaphors like roots and wings in that way. How are you when something new comes along that you're not used to? Do you enjoy it? Do you resist it? I grew up Unitarian Universalist, but I grew up without Spirit of Life because that hymn didn't find its way into our hymnal until I was nearly out of high school. I grew up Unitarian Universalist, but I also grew up without lighting a chalice. The chalice symbol, though first associated with Unitarianism around 1940 or so, didn't actually wind up in churches, in physical form, at the front of the sanctuary with us lighting it as part of the liturgy, until the late 70s, early 80s. And even then, the practice spread slowly across our movement. Unitarian Universalist churches in New England were among the last to adopt the chalice. The aesthetic and theology of the New England church valued worship space being plain and simple and unadorned. The church that I grew up in was very suspicious of symbols. And I believe my childhood church added the chalice when I was away at college. And there was actually a bit of controversy about it. People debated whether or not to invite the chalice into the sanctuary. So I grew up Unitarian Universalist, but without Spirit of Life and without lighting the chalice. And I grew up Unitarian Universalist, but without the 7 principles too. The 7 principles were formally adopted in 1985, but they weren't at that time considered an essential part of our faith. That took at least a decade longer. I remember in high school telling my childhood minister, beaming with pride, that I had memorized the 7 principles, and I expected praise, and I was disappointed because he said, "Why would you do that?" I don't even know what they are. Why are people making a big deal? It was a change to him that he wasn't really that interested in. It wasn't until the mid to late 90s that Unitarian Universalists began to consider the 7 principles as central to our faith's identity. This morning I'm talking about change, and I'm talking about Unitarian Universalism as a faith that changes. And I'm also talking about what it means to belong to a faith, to a community, to a world that changes. I want to offer a few reflections on the place of change in our lives and how we might be faithful to change. I've got one more story. So for me, it was, it was easy as a high school student to get used to the chalice and spirit of life and the 7 principles, because that was, new and I was new. And I want to tell a different story about change. Back in 2011, that year was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and it was the 50th anniversary of this small UU congregation in Louisville, Kentucky, that somehow had invited me to come out to be their keynote speaker for their 50th anniversary. So I flew to Louisville and gave my sermon and then stood in the receiving line afterwards shaking hands. And in the receiving line, up to me walked a woman who must have been the oldest member of that congregation. And she shook my hand and said to me, "Do you know when this religion went wrong?" It was when the Unitarians let those Universalists join us. I hope we'll figure out that that was a bad idea someday. That was 50 years earlier. And sometimes changes that happen even a long time ago, we can still resist and fight those for the rest of our lives. Dear Lord, help me to be more open to change. Because here's the thing. As Unitarian Universalists, our tradition has been one through all of the years, since its very inception and since its forebears, about being open to change. Our religious forebears, they were part of the Radical Reformation in England in the 1500s and the 1600s, who said, let's change everything. They were into change. And in 1620, before the Pilgrims climbed aboard the Mayflower, their minister, who was too old and infirm to make the voyage, preached a parting sermon to them. John Robinson said, "For I am very confident the Lord hath more truth and light yet to break forth out of his holy word." And what a long, strange trip it's been, as we've both embraced change and also struggled with it. This embrace of change, that there is more light and truth to break forth in this world, is why our movement was ahead of every other religious tradition in embracing women's religious leadership, ahead of every other religious tradition in welcoming lesbian and gay and bisexual people and families into our congregations and our leadership, and ahead of every other religious tradition in welcoming trans and genderqueer and gender fluid people into congregations and into leadership. And none of this is to say that any of these changes, theological changes or liturgical changes or bylaw changes or changes in who is included when we say we, none of this is to say that any of these changes happened easily or unanimously or without some resistance. But it's also true that sometimes change can just be hard and overwhelming to us, that it can really provoke us in weird ways. Sometimes a congregation can go out in the streets and protest and shout about the need to change every injustice in society, to reorder the world in a just way, and then come back on Sunday morning and have a conflict over the announcements policy, or that the kitchen was painted a different color. Everything must change, we say, just not that. Or that, or that. I recall that funny saying that I see posted on Facebook from time to time, and most of my Facebook friends are Unitarian Universalists, so they post this, but what's that saying? That ministers graduate from divinity school ready to change the world, and then they find out they can't even change the order of service. Change. Sometimes change is big and we want it, and sometimes we run from it. There's all sorts of places that we could go. We can ask, is it possible to really change as a person? How do we change ourselves? How do we do that? We can ask, is it possible to change somebody else? A lot of us have wanted to, I bet, and a lot of us have struggled. Is that possible? For those of us who care about this world, this community, this country, we might ask, what is the most effective way to go about effecting social change or political change or economic change or cultural change? How do you do it best? And why is it so hard? And for us, why is change sometimes easy and why is it often so very, very hard? But this morning I'm focusing on one slice, one thin sliver of that idea of change. I've spent a lot of time talking about churchy changes, the chalice, the hymnal, the 7 principles. But the reality is that we are part of a world that is changing. We live in a changing world. And I think it's important to ask ourselves, what are our strategies for either embracing change, or if we can't embrace it, then at least being open to change? And if we struggle with being open, then at least being resilient in our living in the face of the changes that go on around us. How do we engage with change? One way to be open to change is to, if you find yourself being reactive to it, and I get reactive to change as well, if you find yourself being reactive to it, a way to respond is to actually get curious about it, to engage it. You don't have to like it, but I expect you to try it, says the parent asking their child to have new experiences with Brussels sprouts, asks the minister telling their congregation to have a new experience with Spirit of Life. And maybe that works. Maybe that's a lesson that we can learn and apply to other areas. I actually remember a conversation on the church Facebook page after my service a couple weeks ago in which there was a big discussion about Brussels sprouts. And one person had said that they'd tried it in all sorts of ways, and then they finally found a restaurant that prepared them, and that changed them and made them open to Brussels sprouts. I think I remember who I said it, but I don't want to quote them. And plus, I don't draw on your Facebook. I won't name your Facebook posts in a sermon. Unless I get mad. Just kidding. So that's one way to get curious about change and playful with it. Another way to respond to changes when changes are hard is to ask, where is trust in this equation? There's a hymn in our hymnal about change that has these words. It says, "Ours is a freedom that reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more, and bids the soul in search of truth adventure boldly and explore." See that rhyme and that meter? But trusts the dawning future more. Right? If there's an element of trust, we can go along with change. I believe that it was Adrienne Marie Brown who said that groups need to move at the speed of trust. And if you can ask, where is the trust in this picture, you're going to be more open to change. And the converse of that is if there's absolutely no trust, if there's an abuse of trust, then the changes are going to be really, really challenging and maybe often not for the good. So be curious, look at trust, and finally, there is this sort of larger perspective, which is to know that change keeps going. Sometimes in my life right now, I feel that by the time I learn something new, a new social media, a new app on my phone, a new COVID policy from the church, that by the time I get used to that, there's something new has happened and it's time to adjust again. And that happens with I'll learn a word that supposedly a generation says, and then I'll be told, no, that's not that word. People don't say that anymore, right? I think that there is, with change, that can either be frustrating or you can find humor in that. You can find humor that change is going to continue rolling on, whether I get with it or not. And so maybe even skip over what I don't understand and get to the next thing. Be curious. Explore trust. And find humor that change continues on. Let's sing together this morning our closing hymn. And I will tell you that it is one that took me a long time to get to love. And now I've actually turned that corner and I have embraced it. It is a hymn about that sort of that things are changing and putting trust in that change. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and remain standing for the remainder of the service, or remain risen for the remainder of the service, as we sing our closing hymn, number 1020 in the teal hymnal, Woyaya.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know it will, and we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 oh yeah.
The words for extinguishing the chalice are in your order of service. Please join me in saying them if you wish to do so. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now let's thank everyone who made this service possible, including the choir. And as we sing shalom, in keeping with our COVID policies, if you would like to hold hands, put your hands out. If you'd rather not, just cross them over your chest. Shalom, my friends, shalom, my friends, shalom, shalom. We'll meet again, we'll meet again. Shalom, shalom.